who are on this call with us are also pretty savvy, but by hook or by crook, we could not figure it out. So we've got this crazy runaround, which is awesome, which is that I'm on the phone with Jim. You can hear both of us. Somebody chat if you can't. You can hear both of us through the microphones in our computers, and we can hear each other through the phone. Somebody out there in Zoom land, give me a thumbs up, applause, feedback. All right. I'm just going to assume everything's okay unless I hear otherwise. So my guest today here on Let's Get Critical is the one, the only Jim Sullivan, amazing, longstanding, venerable music journalist in the city of Boston, Massachusetts, our other fair city. Click and Clack are looking down on me right now. I have had the great pleasure of reading you for many, many years. I had the great pleasure of reading some of your work today. I was just saying that it was fun for me to go back and read your style, because I think that the way that you do an interview has been hugely influential on me. I really love your interview style. And so we were talking about a story that maybe wasn't related so much to music, but still in your style. And I want you to tell me the story that I said you couldn't tell me before. So we are going to rewind after this story, because I'm very interested in how you came to where you are. But I have to hear the story that you started to tell that I stopped you from telling, because it has to do with the main Hell's Angel at Altamont.
It does. It's a quick story. He had a biography. It was around 2000, 2001. He was promoting it in town. I was writing for the Globe, and I was doing the Names and Faces column at the time. So I thought, let's have lunch with Sonny and his young girlfriend at Paparazzi, and I'll talk to him, and I'll do a short story for Names and Faces, which I did. We were drinking over lunch, not much, probably 2 drinks total, but enough for me to get up the, if you will, the courage, the liquid courage, to ask him, well, 2 main questions that made it into the story. One was, have you ever killed anybody? In the book, he did not ever write about killing anybody. He wrote about committing a lot of crimes, but never killing anybody. He had an answer for that. And Sonny had throat cancer, so I'll do the best Sonny I can right here, holding my throat. There's no statute of limitations on murder. Okay, got it, right. You don't talk about that. Fine. And actually, one of my friends who was a former convict, later, when I told him that story, just exploded and said, you never ask anybody that. Oh, yeah, right, okay, good point. The second thing I asked was, this is toward the end of the interview, I see his bike was parked outside, his Harley, and I said, Sonny, what would happen, just say, if I went outside and kicked over your bike? And he went to his throat device and said, you would get hurt. And
like that.
That's my Sonny Barger story.
Not just by the falling bike.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that would have been by people, by him or by others out there. Yes, indeed. So anyway, and yeah, Sonny was the main man responsible at Altamont, which I think most people know the story of. So anyway, that's just a little teaser there for you, JJ. What else do you want? Where do you want to go?
I like it. I want to go backwards.
Go.
Can we go backwards?
Sure.
Okay. Because this is, I find it really interesting that people who write about music and take pictures of music have a special relationship with music. And I like to know where you started, and I mean literally where did you start? Where were your first musical influences when you were 2 years old? Where were you born, and where did you grow up?
Born in Orono, Maine, which is where the University of Maine is. My folks were university people. They had a professor. My mom was an assistant dean at the grad school. And I went to high school there, and then I went to college as an undergrad there, studying broadcasting, film, and journalism. In terms of growing up, however, and in terms of music, I mean, like many people my age, the Beatles were the entry point, and then it went from there. As the 60s went on, and as the things happened in the 60s, well, my dad would bring home the campus newspaper called The Main Campus. In the main campus, there was a rock writer and a pop culture writer by the name of Stephen King. And Stephen King was a very funny, very acerbic writer. And he wrote well about music. And also, this was kind of telling, he disliked things. There were things he disliked that I disliked. One of them was the band Chicago. I know they were good at one point, people tell me, but he hated them. And I suddenly went,
And what year?
excellent, excellent. Somebody who's writing about this dislikes a band that I dislike.
And what year was it?
I'm guessing 69, something like that, 70. So Stephen King went on to some prominence as a novelist later, but that's where he got his start, and that's where I read him before Carrie, before Stan, before anybody knew him as Stephen King, famous writer. He was Stephen King, main campus columnist.
Wow.
And that is a job that I fell into when I went to college too. His column was called King's Garbage Truck. I don't think I had a column name, but I started.
I was going to ask.
I started writing for the main campus, I think my sophomore year, and that and a magazine called Sweet Potato, which started in Portland, Maine, and then later branched out to Boston about the same time I got here. So that's sort of the nuts and bolts of the musical upbringing background.
And what brought you to Boston?
Graduating college and not being totally confident of what I was going to do, being with my girlfriend at the time, she in the same boat as me, and we basically wanted to go to a big city in New England. We toyed with the idea of Hartford, I think, briefly. But basically, Boston was the capital of New England. I knew it reasonably well. She knew it. And we just thought, let's give it a try. I mean, it's the kind of thing you do when you're 21, 22 years old. You roll the dice, and we did. And, what happened later with me doing what I did and latching on with the Globe and doing that for so long, if you'd said what were the odds of me doing that ahead of time, the odds were astronomically bad against me doing that. There were a lot of college students around Boston, and a lot of people probably wanted to do what I ended up doing. But I didn't really know that or didn't really think about that. And just came to Boston with her, did the various crap jobs, and also started writing for the Boston.
What crap jobs? What crap jobs did you do?
I clerked at the Harvard Coop record store. I remember that.
That's not a crap job.
And the reason that sucked was because, I'd been an assistant manager at a record store in Maine, small record store, where we called our shots and we had a lot of fun. And this is a sort of off topic, but it's a funny story. The way corporate record stores had their employees, they had to wear name tags, right?
Sure.
Well, we decided at our little store we would have nose tags one day. So we wrote out little stickers for our noses that said, "Hello, my name is Jim," the way they do. And we wore nose tags one day. Anyway, we were kind of fun. We also, the other thing we did, we gave away free albums every now and then. We would get good albums. I mean, albums that sold like Fleetwood Mac or something. And we'd be stickering them and we'd get 24. We'd get a case of albums in, and every now and then we'd write on a sticker, "Free." Someone would come up to the counter and go, "Free?" "Yes, it is, sir." "Really?" "Yeah, it's yours." And it was so much fun to do that because obviously the person, probably a student at the University of Maine, would go back to the dorm and go, "You wouldn't believe what just happened. What happened to me?" And I got this anyway. So
they're the best store in the world.
That was back in Maine, and I still think it's a great marketing idea.
It is,
Anybody out there who's doing marketing, it's give something away free. People will tell their friends. And anyway, when I came to Boston, started working at the Coop, I had this sort of stupid illusion that it might be kind of fun like that. Oh no, it wasn't fun at all. I was at a register, and you really didn't even talk.
Long before Barnes and Noble, and it was still like that.
Oh yeah, it was a terrible situation. I didn't last long there. And other things, I don't know. What did I do? I typed because that was one skill I had. I remember typing up some papers and things. And anyway, I made stuff.
How did you move from crap job to entree into actual journalism?
Well, Sweet Potato was going as well. Okay, so that kind of. The Boston edition coincided with my coming there. That was one thing. So, I mean, that was not a full-time or really much of a money-making job, but it was writing there in Boston. Oh, the one thing I skipped when I was in Maine, I was also a weekly columnist for the Bangor Daily News, music columnist, and I did features for them as well. So I had daily newspaper experience. In fact, I got credit for it and as one of my courses, as well as getting paid. I got credit, and that bumped got me up to a 3.01 or something like that when my editor kindly gave me an A+ or something. But at any rate, so yeah, I did do some daily newspapering work in Maine. So I brought that with me in my skill set, if you will, in Sweet Potato, which was writing features and reviews that were not maybe as straight-laced as a newspaper column, a little more cream influenced and all that. So the writing was there alongside the crap jobs. And as it turned out, I was doing a feature on the Atlanta rhythm section for playing the Orpheum, and I met one of the Globe's music writers, their staff writer, Ernie Santasorso. We hit it off, we talked, I asked, he said, come in. It kind of went from there. And I mean, he wasn't the person ultimately to do the hiring, but he was in the mix, as was my future colleague, Steve Morse, in terms of recommending me to the editor at the time to say, hey, I think it might be good to bring this young kid in because one thing, punk rock was happening. It connected with me perhaps more than it did with Steve, just put it that way. And he was aware, and I think the Globe was aware, that there was this thing out there that was important and had an audience. And
you were in a place of understanding. You had developed that understanding of that language in maybe a way that was unique and necessary to them, and somebody who could actually write.
Kind of the way I see it, yeah. And, like most anything in life, a combination of skill, luck, timing.
Yeah, and you said to me earlier that, I said this, and I think you agreed with me, and I'm not going to let you argue that you're really talented at interviewing. You're really good at guiding an interview and getting an interview out of people, and I'm kind of wondering is there a kind of interview that really lights your fire that you find more exciting and easy? And what is that kind of sparks that? Where's the flint?
It's different things for different interviews. I mean, I like an interview where it is a conversation, where it's not just QA, stock question, stock answer. There are stock questions that need to be asked in every interview, and I will certainly have a list of things that need to be gotten to. But I'm pretty good at, and hopefully the people I'm talking to are good at, going off book, if you will, following a thread, following something that I didn't expect, and going there. I also don't mind confrontation in a good way. I remember an interview I did with Morrissey back in the day, back when people would loathe him because of his now racist right-wing politics, when he was just controversial in press.
Just controversial. Without all the bigotry
just for being Morrissey, right? And it was a good back and forth. I mean, I think it was some hotel in Boston. I forget which one it was. But I mean, I think he respected it. I think he enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed it. It made for a great story, because whenever there's a little bit of tension between the subject and the writer, and it can be written well, it puts you in the place. And also, it's not, I never saw my job as just being a glad hand or to kind of like just for the subject or just write a puff piece or anything to that extent.
You said this before. You said that you liked how Stephen King wasn't afraid to say that he didn't like something. And I didn't stop you then because I was, I wanted you to roll with where you were at. But you just brought it up again. And I think this is interesting because I have a very kind of a conventional upbringing, but that's the wrong word, not upbringing. My understanding of marketing and media is a little on the conventional side. And I was always taught this kind of like the customer is always right. And you never want to write anything negative about anybody because you're trying to promote them and you're on their team. And like, I've always been very cautious. And when I was writing record reviews, if I didn't like something, I would pass on it rather than write a negative review. And so when you said that, I was like, wow, that actually really jumps out at me as somebody that was always kind of taught not to do that, because I think actually that's quite brave and really important. And I want to explore that.
Well, you put yourself out there on the line, obviously, when you come down on a band or an artist or something like that. And also, you must remember when I was doing this early on, it was the pre-internet age, so people didn't get to have a huge comment section saying what an asshole you were. Maybe privately or in clubs or whatever, that could happen, certainly, and I'm sure it did. But, it was basically, Here was my philosophy. It was sort of derived from really reading Cream growing up and reading some of those great writers, Robert Hull, Bangs, Marsh, you know the crew.
Yeah.
And one of the things there was that you could find a writer you liked by seeing how his or her taste matched your taste.
Of course.
And when they disliked something you disliked, like I was saying with the Stephen King thing back when, that connected just as much as when they loved something. And Banks in particular turned me on to Lou Reed's Berlin. I knew Lou mainly from Rock and Roll Animal and, you know, some of the Velvet stuff that I've gone back to listen to. But Berlin, one of the most despairing albums in the world, and people loved or hated it. Bangs loved it, called it the Sgt. Pepper of the 70s or something, with some hyperbole. Anyway, it was enough for me to buy it. And I just loved it. And it was way outside my sphere of experience. It was about drugs that I'd never done, didn't even really existed. It was about sadomasochism. It was about beating. It was about death. It was about poverty. It was about men of good fortune, rich people. It was so rich and deep and so outside the realm of me as whatever I was, 15 or 16. It was wonderful. And if Lester hadn't written that, I never would have gotten it. I mean, years later, maybe. But at the time.
That was a positive review.
That was a positive one.
So I understand what you're saying, though, about that you get a read on somebody from what they don't like and that you don't like it, and then you'll watch them for the things that they do. Have you ever found yourself reading somebody where you're like, I don't think I agree with them, and going out and listening to something that they'd panned?
Yes, definitely.
And liking it?
If it's, yes, both, so, you know, it could go both ways. But I very much enjoyed reading well-written, articulated, and sometimes humorous negative reviews. You know, if somebody's that passionate about it, and especially if they argue their case well, you go, wow, all right. But there may be a few buzzwords in the review that turn you on, you know, or not. I mean, but it's certainly interesting to me to read those. And, you know, I gotta say, in the local world as it's constructed now, I think rock reviews tend to be in our, I was going to say, the few mainstream places we have that exist still now, including my old alma mater, the Globe, things tend to be pretty positive pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I think the policy is pretty much, we don't have much space. We don't even really have an arts section anymore. So if we're going to write something, let's write something that's positive, I guess. I was happy that back in the day when I did it, the Globe was very flush with cash, space, real estate in which to write, and had no problem with me, you know, ripping into somebody if I felt that was justified.
Do you feel like there's space for that? Is there space for that on the internet? Is there space for ripping into people on the internet?
What about ripping people on the internet?
Is there space in now that, so my heart is breaking a little bit, what you just said. When I think about how much I loved reading the Globe in a paper format, and you know, it's just that hurt. But do you think that there's a place on the internet for constructive criticism? Is there more space on the internet for writing about
space is infinite. Space is infinite on the internet. But again, it's a difficult search because, I mean, all of these websites and blogs, you know, to try to find one you agree with mostly or you find entertaining, you know, whether it's Brooklyn Vegan or whether it's Pitchfork. Or,
I was going to ask, what are you reading?
I'm like anybody. I may punch up a subject and then after the subject, I do the scroll.
Yeah, do you think you read based on the critic, or do you think you read based on like what pops up on Facebook?
It's more what pops up, I think, because at this point, I don't have the list of critics to admire that I had when I was younger.
What's that doing to the critic? What's that doing to the genre of the critic that we don't? I mean, it's like albums, right? We listen to singles now. We don't listen to albums. But the critic, because I've been trying to do this too. I've been thinking, like, who do I know? Okay, well, I know the people that I know here because they're important to me, right? Like, I know you. I know Michael Murata. I know Victoria or you know, Sam Patriquez. Like, these are the names I know because this is my world. But I don't think that there is a critic a national critic that I bet you could name some.
Well, you're right, and I think I can say why in many ways. Look, anybody anywhere can stream anything with YouTube or Spotify or Deezer or whatever service you have. So in effect, everybody in the world has the free record service that I had when I was a rock critic. Simply getting LPs or CDs that were delivered by the box load day after day. A tremendous luxury. I spent many nights kind of, pouring a vodka and soda, putting on this disc, putting on that disc, kind of going through them, hopefully making some choices about what to write about. But everybody really can be their own critic now. So if they hear a name, or if it's on a friend's Spotify list or something like that, they can go to it and they can make their own decision, and they don't necessarily need somebody to guide them that way. So, I mean, that's both good and bad. I mean, making up your own mind is a good thing, but I do love that I had these people that I could see as kind of guideposts, if you will, that helped me back when I was a kid and I was buying records in used record shops, and I'd hear about a band. I remember one of the Cream reviews reviewed this band Silverhead that Michael Debar was in. Kind of a great, nasty garage rock band from England. And I loved them, but I found both of their albums in a cutout net, $2.99 or whatever they were at the time, $1.99. Never would have heard of them, never would have thought of them unless I'd read them, read that review. And having done so, they became one of my, briefly, I guess, one of my core bands back in the day. So that's kind of that. I do want to ask JJ, because I think you wanted to get into some of the interviewing stories. So do you want to switch gears?
I do. So what I want to do is I want to pause for a moment. I'm going to ask Aaron to run a 30-second ad, and then we're going to definitely come back to that.
Excellent.
I'm Chris Porter from Porter Productions and Once Somerville. We ask that you please donate to the artists featured in this video. They are so kind to our venue, and Once is very grateful that they are sharing their talents with all of us today. The link to their tip jar is in the comments section of this video. We're also including a link to our own GoFundMe campaign, which we hope you'll also consider donating to as well. Performance helps bring our communities together, and that's really our main purpose at Once. We want everyone to be able to enjoy art, and we particularly want to enjoy all of that art together. So we're making that possible by any means we can. Thank you so much for being a part of this experience, both at home and when you're with us in the ballroom or in the lounge.
Cool. That was our dear friend Chris Porter. I don't know if you know Chris Porter.
I thought he looked familiar. I know Chris very well. We used to go to Red Sox games together back when A, he lived around here, and B, you could go to Red Sox games.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's been deeply involved in the generation of Once Somerville, the Wayward event space.
Yes, indeed. That I know.
He's a terrific guy, and that little piece is great. We don't have any artists to donate to right now, so donate to save our stages.
Absolutely. I've done, JJ, as you know, I've done some writing about that.
I do know.
Featured you in a couple of those stories. There's actually going to be another one, a print story for Flood magazine that's going to be coming out in October.
Wonderful.
I just found that last week, and yes,
we've got to stay on it.
It's a lot. Yeah, it is. It's definitely stay on the topic, and I mean, it's an expansion of what I wrote for their website about whatever it was a couple of weeks ago. So anyway, yes, that's a very important issue, no question.
So, and you wrote about hologram rock concerts.
I did.
And I'm kind of curious, like that piece was a while ago now.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe we might want to talk a little bit, because it's something you were thinking about already, like this virtual experience. And what have you seen based on what you already were reading? What do you think? What do you think is happening that you were anticipating? And how is this going to play out? What is this? Are we going to continue to see this tech influence?
Well, maybe. I mean, I hate to be vague, but I don't really know. And I mean, the question, who I saw the ghost of Buddy Holly and the ghost of Roy Orbison play a concert together at the, not on Renaissance Street, on Tremont Street. How weird was it? It was sort of weird. Obviously, they're not there. It's a hologram you're watching. You're watching live bands and Buddy Holly and Roy Orbison, the images of them with the vocals, with the real vocals remastered and very clear and very good. And it takes a few songs to kind of get over both the novelty and the strangeness and the, almost morbid in some ways feeling about these dead people singing to you. And then at some point, it also kind of kicks in where you go, God, I like this music. This is really enjoyable. It's a real mind scramble, to be honest with you. And
could you see this technology being used in the pandemic setting as a way to share a live experience?
I don't think so, because what was very important was to have the bands playing live behind real people. And they were great session players. So that gave it a live kick that it really needed.
But what if, just saying, one of the big pandemic problems is singers? So what if you had that live band, but then you could hologram in the important person that doesn't want to be exposed? Beyonce.
Not thought of that. That's an interesting question. I mean, I wonder if anybody at that sort of top level has thought about that. I mean, the thing is, there are so many barriers to get over as deciding whether you want to go see this or not, because so much of the live experience is the communion we feel with the performer, or think we feel, or want to feel. When you know that performer isn't there, their communion isn't quite there. I mean, they're not responding to you. You're not really responding to them. So I don't know.
Are we less sensitive to that now because we've readjusted to this kind of concept that we have to be virtual? Do you think people are feeling more connected in a virtual setting than they might have before?
It's possible. And I will say this too. I mean, it was, when I came out of it, the experience, it was less weird than I thought it was going to be, So it's funny. I mean, I don't want to be pegged as somebody saying, yes, this is the future of rock and roll, hologram, or now during the pandemic, hologram. I don't know. I mean, it's out there. It's very limited. I mean, there's a Ronnie James Dio one. There's the Holly Orbison one I was telling you about. God, there are a couple more, but I wrote the story a while ago, so I can't really remember. But anyway, what I wanted to do, if I can, is in a couple of anecdote interview kinds of stories.
Ooh, I hope so. I actually had a really good time reading famous quotes today, so I was like, let's tell some stories.
A few of those have shown up.
Who are they?
Well, yeah, I know it's sort of it's a game.
I love it.
It's fun. I know it's fun to write, and I mean I've got such a repository of them. I'll tell you one of them that was in one of the editions. I can't remember. Is I'll tell you the name first because it's not a game here. Hugh Cornwell of the Stranglers. I was interviewing them back in '77. I actually was living in Maine at the time, but they came down to Boston to do a promo tour, and I was doing the thing for Sweet Potato, so I came down to do the interview with him and I think Jean-Jacques. And the Stranglers' first album, as you may or may not know, was noted for its misogyny or the lyrics that perhaps suggested a misogynistic viewpoint. And so at some point in the interview, no, not right away, but somewhere in the interview, it had to be asked. And I said to Hugh, there are people who think you guys are misogynists. Are you? He says, no, we're not misogynists. We're misanthropes. We hate everybody. Okay, all right, fair enough. Follow-up question, Jim. Well, okay, so what do you think about women then? What place do they have? Well, there's some empty places in their lives I think we could fill up. I gather you get the context there. Okay, so it made good copy, and it was sort of appalling. Many years later, and I'm really talking somewhere, God, I don't know, 2011, something like that maybe. Hugh was playing a club in Boston, and I still like him and his music and the Stranglers' music, his solo music, and he's led a life that's been very accomplished in many ways and not in other ways. But anyway, I went to see him, and we talked after the show a bit, and I brought him back to that time, and he was just so chagrined and embarrassed. It's like, did I really say, it's like, did I say that? I really, yeah, I was there. It was memorable. And it was just like, oh God, how can I apologize so many years down the road? So anyway.
I'm so glad. You just made my day.
It was good. I like that too. I mean, it was like, and this is not a woke thing. Woke didn't even exist then, but it was just, he realized that, that was really a smart ass thing to say. But anyway, that was fun.
It was a punk thing to say. Remember punk?
And it was a punk thing to say. Yeah. It was.
They were punk.
So,
when we were punk.
when we were this is kind of a fun one just because, well, famous name and just an interesting introduction to him. I was doing an interview with Pete Townsend. It was 1985 in New York, and the Who had broken up. He was actually touting a book of essays he wrote called Horse's Neck, and this was my first interview with him. I did a couple
I
later.
remember that book. Mm-hmm.
This was, yeah, good book, harrowing book.
Yeah.
And we, so we went in the room to start the interview. And, I got to admit, I mean, I'm pretty good with celebrity, and I really always have been. And I mean, for whatever reason, I'm not that intimidated. But let's put it this way. I mean, Pete Townsend's pretty much up on the list of people I respect, admire, I grew up listening to, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I walk in, sit down, hey, hi. Hey. He takes a look at quizzically, kind of looks at my lapel. I have a suit jacket on. And on the lapel I've totally forgotten about this, but I've been wearing it, was a little pin, a shamrock that had the Pogues name in it. The Pogues, tiny little pin. And he looks at it and goes, "Oh, you're a Pogues fan, aren't you?" And I went, "Well, yeah, actually, I was in England not that long ago and saw them and blah, told him a little story about seeing them." And he said, "I love the Pogues." And that was, I mean, it wasn't an intentional icebreaker, but talk about a great way into an interview. There wasn't a set time of like 20 minutes in and out. We had time. He wanted to talk. I was happy to talk. He was happy to hear my story about what I liked about them. I wanted to know what he liked about them. And none of it factored in the story that I ended up writing, because I'm not writing about the Pogues. I'm writing about Pete Townsend and the Who in his book. But just in terms of getting on a level where I felt like he was a fan like I was a fan. He was a famous fan, and I was a young writer. But at that point in time, we were on the same level.
It's a way to open him up.
Yeah, unintentionally, but it was just wonderful, and I respect him for kind of picking up on it. I mean, it's a tiny little green pin on my lapel. So anyway,
Were you nervous going into that?
Yeah, slightly. I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm really pretty good with celebrity.
Where did you learn that? Where did you learn to be good with celebrity? Is that a natural thing? Is that a nature thing or a nurture thing?
I'm going to say nature. I don't know.
Taught you that?
I do not know. I don't know. It's something that just is inherent with me. I mean, I think it's kind of just the basic idea of treating all people with a certain amount of respect and dignity, but not to put people on a pedestal. And I mean, in the sort of the inverse way is, when you're buying a cup of coffee at a lunch counter, well, you treat that person with respect too. Yeah. And, the same kind of respect you would talk to a celebrity with. And it kind of, you try to equal it out and just kind of go, everybody here is human. And yeah, there's a fame aspect to it. But it didn't, I don't know. It just never really was that much of a barrier. I didn't get too tongue-tied. The only time I remember really not knowing what to say was meeting Johnny Cash.
Wow, yeah.
He was the first concert I ever saw when I was 12. Wonderful.
But you didn't meet him when you were 12.
No. This was as a reporter many, many years down the road at the Somerville Music Circus after a show he and his wife had done, and with Marty Stewart there with him. And it wasn't a one-on-one or anything. It was just kind of a meet and greet after the show. And I was fine. I was like, great. I'm kind of one of my heroes. And I finally got to the front of the line. And, I kind of rehearsed what I wanted to say. And then I just kind of went, my thoughts went out. And so what I came up with was, I know your daughters, Carlene. I mean, your stepdaughter Carlene and Roseanne. I've interviewed them and reviewed them and talked to them, and that was really all I had. It's like, what am I doing? What am I trying to do here? I'm trying to say, I know some members of your family who are also musicians, but it was sort of like he was very kind of hello, good to meet you, pleased to meet you. I was like, oh, thank you.
So I have a question that just got sent over from Facebook, and I love this question, and it's actually like one of the ones that sometimes I reach for too. And that is, so you got sent in on assignment, and what was the worst show that you can remember getting sent into that you had to review?
Well, that's easy. Nickelback.
Why?
I don't remember, and I'm not going there.
Because it can't just be that you hate the music, right?
JJ,
Like, why? Come on.
JJ, you're not dragging me down into the dark pit of why Nickelback sucks.
Not Nickelback? Okay.
Anybody can just Google Nickelback sucks. Look it up on Google and you'll find out.
Second
No,
worst. Give me another one. Give me another one. I want something a little less obvious because that is
Bon Jovi was one.
It was a bad show.
It was Bon Jovi. It was no, I won't say it was necessarily a bad show. It was, look, I've always seen them as kind of a mediocre hard rock band with some hooks, but sort of paint by numbers. It's sort of easy listening for people who think they're rock fans, I guess.
Music for people who don't like music.
Yeah, they like it, but their level of depth and getting into music, I think, is pretty surface, and that's fine. I mean, look, I'm a rock critic. I listen to a lot of stuff, and my tastes run differently, and they're more maybe complicated or something. I don't know, but Bon Jovi just hit me as cheese pretty much all the way through. And,
so,
I will put a shout out here to our good friend Johnny Angel, who I'm sure you know, because Johnny and his band, the Swinging Erudites, did the Bon Jovi parody that is so well worth finding. Shot Through the Heart, this tune's so lame, we give rock a bad name.
Is it on YouTube?
I'm not sure if it is or not.
See if Darren can find it. She's really good at this. If it's out there, she'll find it.
Swinging Erudites, that's what it is, yes.
So what show that you can remember, I'm sure you can remember several, were you like, Nickelback, Bon Jovi, whatever, obviously not those, but and you came out of it surprised, like, whoa, that actually wasn't.
Oh, you're saying I went into it with a sort of
pleasant surprise. I want a pleasant surprise.
Oh, pleasant surprise. I hadn't prepared for that one.
Yay! I came up with a question you didn't anticipate.
You know what? I'll go with this. This is kind of an odd one, maybe, but one of the later reconfigurations of Leonard Skinner.
I wouldn't expect that to be good either.
No, and I mean, I'm not going to say it was all the way through, and politically, they're not my cup of tea. But I do have a history with the band, having liked them when I was younger, and then discarding them later in my punk and post-punk years, because really, didn't we all? And then I was reviewing them and coming back to them, going somewhat grudgingly, and. Obviously Ronnie was long gone. Hell, most everybody was gone, dead or retired, or not in the band. So it was, only a few original members. I don't even remember how many, but it worked for me. They have some good material beyond Freebird, and yes, when they got to Freebird, I was able to put aside my innate sort of like, I can't stand to hear Freebird again. Damn it, get away. I put that aside and was able to just kind of roll with the solos and get into it, and I think non-ironically do that. So I'll say
slow dance deep in your soul.
Yeah, it did, and I mean that's funny, I think, too, JJ, because people of our age, my age anyway, we sometimes think some of the things we liked and then dismissed when punk came along, sometimes they circle back to us later in life and we go, damn, that was good after all. Why did I kick that to the curb? And I mean, one of those bands for me was Blue Oyster Cult. Not that I kicked them to the curb, really, but I mean, they were a really seminal band for me growing up. And then, punk came in, and that was that. But re-listening to Blue Oyster Cult now, those first 3 albums.
Are you telling me I'm going to return to David Gates and Bread?
What about them?
Am I going to return? Is this where I'm going to go back to?
Oh my God, you like David? Oh no!
I loved when I was a kid.
Oh God! Wow, that came from out of the blue. No,
punk rock.
Save yourself from that. I hope. Yeah.
I think David Gates and Bread was a little bit pre-punk for me. I think there was a phase between Bread and punk.
Yes.
It probably did include something like Blue Oyster Cult.
Yeah. Well, and of course, all the great glam rock of Bowie and Roxy and all that from that era too. Just terrific. It wasn't just as.
Bowie.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever meet him? Did you ever meet Bowie? Did you get?
Oh yeah.
Bowie,
yeah.
What was that like? Talk about David Bowie. Tell me everything.
Well, interviewed him, I think 3 times. Met him once when he did a Foxborough show in person, and very well. I mean, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know. I'm a very intelligent, self-critical person to interview. And also, we were talking about the thing before about asking somebody, kind of a contentious question. I was asking him about allegations that he is perhaps a ripoff artist. He kind of a vampire who kind of leaps upon other scenes and steals what he wants from them and puts them into his own music. There had been a cartoon that had sort of suggested that I thought was hilarious, and I brought it up to him, and he loved it. And he said, it kind of is. I mean, it was sort of like, yes, I do. I'm curious. I like all kinds of music, and I do sniff about what's going on. And I do take bits and pieces from what other people have done and put them in my own, which is what an artist does. It's not necessarily vampiric. And I mean, my phrasing it was, meant humorously, and his response was also humorous. But I thought it was an interesting way to approach one of the criticisms about him, and I liked the way he, approached it or answered it.
Uh-huh.
And so I miss him greatly, as do many of us.
Sort of an it's all been done, so you can reinvent it.
Yeah.
Return, restart, reinvent.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that was what he did often. So it was a good thing there. I was just thinking.
Oh yes, go ahead.
I was just going to just do one of the best sort of story interview situations of my career, be in the mid '80s with Jerry Lee Lewis, the Killer. For some reason, I can't explain it really why, but he played Boston a fair amount back in the day, the Channel mostly. And I did several stories with him. Actually, there was one up at the Club Casino in New Hampshire and then at the Channel. And for some reason, he trusted me, let me into his inner circle, backstage circle of craziness and heaven and hell and profanity and whiskey and everything. And it was a time, when Rolling Stone had just written a story that had suggested that he perhaps had killed his wife, the previous wife. And the story was pretty convincing. And that had to come up in my interview too. I was the first interview that he had done since that allegation had been made. And actually, this one, I think we were talking, this was when he was up in New Hampshire. I think he was 49 at the time. And we rode in his limo from New Hampshire, from the Club Casino to whatever airport he was going in. And I was with some friends. He was the one who said, well, just get in my limo with me and my girlfriend. I said, oh, okay. And I told my friends, follow in the car. Do not, please, if the limo stops, please stop, because I don't know how this is going to go.
Don't leave me.
Well, he's known to do things. And, when the topic came up, did you kill her? Well, no, he said he didn't. And he talked about how he found her and how she had mistaken his methadone for aspirin and had overdosed on his methadone. Does that happen? Not that much, I don't think. But anyway, the other thing was this. They were sleeping, I guess, in separate beds. And he said he came in to find her in the morning. And he showed me how he found her. And he found her with her arms crossed over her chest in the classic corpse position. Do you die in that position? Or are you kind of placed in that position? And, the stories I wrote, and I wrote several. I wrote one for the Globe, I wrote one for Cream. There was one that was syndicated all around. Pretty much let him talk and, just kind of set it up. Reader, make your own judgment. But here's what he says. And if there are things that don't seem to match up, well, I don't think they do either. So it was a pretty, from a rock and roll / reporting point of view, it was quite a story.
Yeah.
The way it kind of ended up actually is, I think I last saw him, I've seen him since, but I spent time with him, I think probably 87 or 88 or something. It was Bottom Line in New York. And we were on good terms. I mean, I went backstage after the show, and if I recall this correct, we both knocked back a fair amount of whiskey. And this was before his bio, Great Balls of Fire, had come out, had been written, had been done. I mean, and he was looking for somebody to do his biography or to ghost it or whatever, collaborate. And he asked me if I wanted to do it. And at the time, I said, yeah, that'd be great. And, you know, the caveat here is we were both drinking. And what happened the next day was I woke up, hangover, of course, and thought, Jesus, what did I just agree to do? Or sort of agree to do. And what I agreed to do, if I had indeed agreed to do it or signed any paper, would have been to spend probably a year or two of my life with this guy, telling his story the way he wants it to be told. And this would not end well.
No.
That's all I can really say. So what happened? Well, of course, nothing happened. He forgot, or it didn't come up again. I forgot, or it didn't come up again. And
Yay!
all that comes up now is an anecdote talking to you, JJ.
I'm so glad that one just kind of.
Yeah, it was a good assignment not to have happened. It would have disrupted everything.
Kind of want to let it go.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been well. So anyway,
it's a good one. You could write a whole story just imagining the other direction that could have gone.
Oh God, I know.
So what's the furthest that you've ever traveled to do an interview?
London or LA, I guess.
And why?
Back when the Globe had money, they sent me to LA on fairly regularly. Did both movie things, TV things, and music things. And did a story on the Sunset Strip back when it was the LA Guns N' Roses, heavy metal capital of the world. Remember that was one of the ones they did out there, and a few other things. So I flew on their dime and stayed at lovely hotels on their dime, and it was a very nice perk that happened back in the day. London, actually, I was over visiting somebody, and that was on my dime, and it just turned out to.
And who was that?
Well, it was a visiting friend, but I mean, it was what
no,
happened
I meant,
there.
Who did you interview?
Oh, that was my introduction to the Pogues. They had just started. I saw them play at the Mean Fiddler Club in London. It was one of the best gigs I'd ever seen in my life. And, I met Shane for the first time before the gig. It was, he did some press and talking in the afternoon. And I remember him, it was at Filthy McNasty's, the club. And I just remember walking up the stairs to meet them at the bar. And he was walking the other way down the stairs, drink in each hand. And, I won't try to do a Shane voice imitation, but basically he said hi as best he could. And I said hi as best I could. And we went on from there. And then seeing the gig and everything. And it was almost transformative. It was such a fun, it was where I did not expect punk rock to end up in 1985, but it did. And the Celtic flavor that, is in me somewhere, being Sullivan, really came out with this bite and this edge and this harshness that Shane had. And, an incredible lyricist and songwriter.
We're unfortunately going to be winding up pretty soon, which breaks. Yep. I can't believe it. I just, this flew by. I love listening to you. I could listen to you for many more hours. I hope you'll come talk to me again. But I want to ask you, we haven't stepped at all into the nightmare that music is in right now. This is a whole other conversation, kind of, is the pandemic and what's happened to live music and the ripple out for all of us in that. And I'm not going to go on a deep dive because we'll all start to cry. And but I wanted to ask you to just give me a couple of minutes of maybe your 3 favorite venues to see bands in, and maybe just what's special to you about those places and who you saw there.
I can't quite answer that in terms of venues, JJ, and I know you run Once, and that's a great club. But
don't expect you to pimp Once.
The way I would answer it is that, quite honestly, I mean, I go where the show is, and I don't Yes, I mean, different clubs, different theaters have different atmospheres and ambience and all the rest of it. But if the band is the band I want to see, I will go wherever they're playing, from the Wang Center to well, what's
So
left?
do you not
Lions,
feel, do you not feel particularly like stronger about standing or sitting or sight lines? Do you feel
It depends
like
on
it's just who it is,
it
you'll go?
depends on the show. I will say certainly that the older I get, the less likely it is I'm going to want to stand for an entire show, and then opening act and all the rest of it's just a case of my back, and so that happens. So I don't mind seated shows at all, but really, my taste is pretty much across the board. So it's whether it's seeing King Crimson in the Wang Center or I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to pick a scruffy punk rock band or something. And I know the Dream Syndicate at once. That was a great show, by the way. That was a great show. That one I happily stood for the whole damn thing. And they went on, and that was wonderful. But those are two kind of different ends of the spectrum. I mean,
Very much.
one very smart kind of garage rock and punk psychedelia, and the other being Crimson's intricate art rock, and one being an ornate theater, and once being not an ornate theater. So I mean, that's I'll go anywhere if the music is there.
All right. Where the music is, Jim will follow.
Where the music is. That's right.
Where the music is. Well, I believe that we will be going out to see music again. I think that there's going to be a lot of music that's going to happen in a lot of ways before we go inside together.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a while. I think we'll get there, but things are going to be some combination of virtual, I think, for a while longer, and hopefully we'll settle into some place. One thing we didn't touch on at all, and we don't have time now, so maybe I shouldn't even pop this can of worms, but we're gonna have to come back just to talk about local music in Boston.
Sure.
And I'm proud of our scene. I'm proud of people because they're making music. They jumped right online. They're doing great work, and I hope that you're reviewing it and looking forward to writing about it more. I loved your pieces about NEVA. Thank you for writing about NEVA, the National Independent Venue Association.
That is very important. And I mean, you put in the plug for that. I mean, that is really a case of, it may get the bill, the Save Our Stages bill. It may get buried with all the other stuff that's going on with the post office, with other, that need me to enumerate it, but I hope and pray that it does not get buried and that this thing passes. It's essential, as you so well know, to the survival of places like yours, and places much bigger than yours. I mean, it affects everyone, from musicians to caterers to everyone.
I feel very strongly about the 9:30 club. That's my particular focus.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, these are the venues we can't.
Yeah, I know.
So Jim, I'm going to thank you again. This has been just so much fun. Thank you for fighting through the technology and for coming and chatting with me for an hour. And I know you're busy, and I appreciate it. I truly do. And I hope we can do it again. Maybe in the fall, we'll go a little bit deeper on the local music scene and what you're loving.
That would be
what
fun.
You're hating. I want to.
Actually, I've grown mellower over the years. So anyway, yeah, thank you, JJ. It's been fun. I enjoy it too. All right. I'm going to put the phone down now, so that means I won't be able to hear you no matter what you say. Bye-bye.
Bye, Jim. Good night.